Well, I don't know. A lot of pleasant memories. It was a lot of good customers. Farming folk was fine to get on with a lot of good customers. No trouble with them and no bad debts or anything like that kind. We don't have well with them. Our customers.
Was it a 5-day week, a 6-day week, or a 7-day week, Douglas?
A kind of a 5.5-day week in the mill, but your other time was turn up. We were croft outside.
Was that the same in your father's time as well?
Oh, aye.
Aye.
Oh, yes.
So had your father up at New Deer, did he crofty as well?
Yes, he did croft as well. But no a lot acres. Wasn't many acres up there. But it was a very busy mill up there at that time. When we were up there, when I was at the school, oh, it was a busy place.
Is it still standing, Douglas?
It is just is standing. Yes, is it? But I grown pretty dilapidated looking now. Last time it's a year since I was past it.
It's up at Greens.
Up at Greens in New And I know if you know that place, the store Greens Union Motors, as they call it. Where are the sales is at? I would stop where you go at. Just right. down in the hollow before you go up to Greens.
At the New Deer side.
At the New Deer side. Yes. And I know if you know Cairnbanner School, have you? Have you? Oh well, that's where I went to Cairnbanner School. Oh, well, just a stone's throw here, just down in the hollow. Oh, near a quarter of a mile.
What's your memories of Cairnbanner?
Oh, a lot of happy memories here. A lot of happy memories. Far learned to dance and the rest of the Cairnbanner School and concerts and play the fiddle and.
Is that right?
Oh yes.
You were born in Sandhaven?
Yes.
Right. For good?
In the Shore Street, in the house next to R10.
Right.
And the R10 was built by a man called Noah Birney. And I presume that's the reason that it's called the Ark.
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark. And according to my mother, who lived in Sandhaven most of her life, the R10 was the oldest house in the village. Not the oldest, the second oldest house in the village. And at that particular time, it belonged to A.C. Sim. And he was a shoemaker shop in Sandhaven. And according to her, she said that the oldest house in Sandhaven was on the terrace. That's a small house at the end of the terrace nearest Fraserburgh.
Oh, I see. Aye. What recollections have you got in your younger day in Sandhaven? I must have been, partly because there must be a lot of changes the day as if there was there.
Oh, yes.
There being a lot more fishermen and that.
A lot more fishermen. There was, in Sandhaven, you see, there was just the High Street and the Shore Street and the terrace. Stewart Street, where the boatyard is, and the terrace. There's not much change in Pittulie because there's no more new houses. There was the boatyard, you see. There was the boat building yard. But of course, the boatyard sort of collapsed after the First World War. But then it started up again. I just couldn't tell you the exact year, but it started up again. And of course it's flourished ever since, until now, unfortunately. There wasn't a lot of changes, I suppose, structurally, until they started building the new houses.
Oh, it was in Sandhaven?
Yes. But there were two churches. There was the Free Kirk, as we spoke about, that's the one that we worship in now. And then there was the Old Kirk, the one that's made into a public hall.
Was the old kirk, was that the parish kirk?
The parish kirk, yes. But the free kirk, the folk that were free kirk went of course to the free kirk, and then there was the old established kirk, was the old kirk folk, went to their own.
Now if it was Pittulie here, have you seen any changes in Pittulie at all?
Well, you see, when I was young, there were fishermen, or quite a number of fishermen here.
Right.
Fishermen that owned boats. The fishermen that I remember working for quite a number of years was Alec Mitchell. Alec Mitchell's father, Jokia. And he had a boat. I suppose it had been the line fishing they worked.
Small boat.
Small boat. Small boat. Yeah, they had a baldy boat again. And but there was quite a few more fishermen worked from the harbour here in Sandhaven.
Do any of the boats in that earlier years that you can recall work out of the small creek is Pittulie here?
Oh yes, oh yes. You see, they carried on. There was herring curing here in Sandhaven in one day, once upon a time.
This would have been even before the last war, I think. They're still curing London.
Yes. The herring boom. No, in 1855, the number of men and boys fishing from the two villages,
Sandhaven and Pittulie,
you're speaking about that, was 170. Pittulie, for 20 years, it must have looked out. They're speaking about the castle of Pittulie. The castle of Pittulie continued to be inhabited until 1850, and for 20 years, therefore, it must have looked out on the thriving fishing villages of Sandhaven and Pittulie. For it was in 1830 that Sir John Forbes built the great harbour at Sandhaven, extending to 14 acres at a cost of £4,205. And in 1855, the number of men and boys fishing from the two villages was 170. The herring boom brought curing stations and a general air of prosperity to the villages, and around 1890 there were 46 boats belonging to Pittulie and 91 fishermen. But to visit Sandhaven today, you wouldn't believe that only a century ago it was a bigger port than Fraserburgh, and that the now decaying harbour walls bulged with so many vessels that you could boat hop across the harbour. The only fishing done now is by part-time lobster fishermen at the weekends. Their small boats ride idly at anchor all week while they earn their living in Fraserburgh factories. And fishing is a recreation rather than a way of life.
And that's who it is today.
In last century, fish curing yards thrived at Sandhaven Harbour on the site now occupied by the boat building firm J&G Forbes and Company, and the curing premises closed about 90 years ago here.
Can you recall any curing at all?
I can't.
No, you
but
can't.
my mother could.
Your mother could.
Because her grandmother used to go to the curing. You know, they got in the curing. I think she used to help her. Oh, there's quite a number, you see, because I'll tell you something I remember her speaking about. There were folk came here from Nairn, and there were fishermen came from the Highlands to work here at the fishing during the summer, because my mother took in boarders, you see, and at least her grandmother did, and they used to stay with them. some of the hillmen, you know, when they came ashore, would stay. They would stay with different folk in the village, I presume, you see, to work at the fishing. But as soon as the fishing finished, they were away home to help with the harvest.
Aye, aye.
You see? At the end of the season.
What recollections have you got of Pittulie here now itself that you can recall? Just personal memories.
Well, you see, the old fishermen, you could see them baiting their lines at their doors, at the outside. They had their
All along the street here?
along the street here, just fishermen's houses. I can remember Jokie R's and Bailey's and Elsie Foley's. See, that's old timers now, you see. But I can remember them baiting their lines just outside the door, you know. And of course, there's a lot of folk here had hens. But you see, there was a lot of folk had jokes. And you've heard the saying, the folk that belonged to Pittulie were Pittulie jokes. And it used to be, you see, once upon a time, there wasn't fancy streets like what there were now. And there were no buses. Walking through the village, there's a lot of folk who'd walk at the resort in their day. And they said when they were walking through Pittulie, you could never walk through Pittulie without saying jokes. You see? And then there's lochies, there's 7 lochies. Bill Spence speaks about the 7 lochies in his book, The Gulf of War. And of course that's far you could see the jokes. You can. But we never had jokes, but my mother had hens. And mine are not fine.
Bill Spence Forsyth, was it Pittulie he belonged to here?
He belonged to Pittulie. His father was Sandhaven. Actually, his father was an uncle of my mother's. But he was brought up more or less with his grandparents. His grandfather was, my mother referred to his grandfather as Al Spence. And it was Al Spence's daughter, Kirsten, that was Bill Spence's mother, you see. But he was more or less, I think, brought up with the grandparents. And he seemed to reside a lot to the grandparents. And of course, he was a great Pittulie man. And he had a great love for Pittulie, and he came here for year after year after year.
So far was you born in Pittulie here, Pittulie?
Now, I'm just never sure. You see, Spence's house was the 3rd house for the end there, number 60.
Number 60?
Number 60, that was Spence's house.
Aye.
So, but I hardly think Bill was, I'm just trying to mind if Bill had been born here. I think he was, but I think he was born here. But probably it had been there, unless of course now, I just can't mind exactly fit the house it would have been. Maybe it had been in his grandfather's house.
Can you mind in Bill Forsyth yourself?
Oh my!
Aye.
Oh, he came here.
Aye. Can you tell us about him?
Well, he was educated at Sandhaven School. During Mr. Caird's time at Sandhaven. You've heard of W.J. Caird. He was headmaster here for years and years. He was my headmaster. Well, he was educated here. In fact, he was a pupil teacher. You've heard the days of pupil teachers before they went to the college. Well, he was a pupil teacher here because I've got a photograph of him taken with Mr. Caird and a few other teachers. I think there were about 5 or 6. Either teachers at the school or pupil teachers. He'd been at the university, but then he'd been called up because he was in the First World War.
I see.
After the war, I presume after he was demoted, you see, he was a headmaster in Fife. I think he spent most of his time in Fife, in different schools. He was at Tayport, and he was at Garbridge. But during that time, he often came here to spend holidays. I can't remember exactly when he died, but I think he was about 80 when he died.
He had a love for poetry.
Oh, he had a great love for poetry. He wrote a lot of articles to the People's Journal. I'm sorry we didn't sort of keep them, but he used to write regular articles to the Present Journal about fishing, you know.
Aye.
And of course when he came up here, he just spent most of his time with the different fishermen.
Aye.
Discussing fishing and one thing or another, you see. But he was a great man for family history.